just shoveled your drive. Give me $200.
I don't have a drive. This is an apartment building.
Fuck you, you cheating cocksucking son of a bitch, dissing Percy Spencer. You just wait, you'll see who's more of a cocksucker, mister.
Holy shit, this situation is a big mess. Oh my god. Hello guys, Sav, aka Elect the Dead here. Today we're going to be going over some allegations against Nickcheezy. If you don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, he got himself into some hot water over serious allegations such as mainly being a child predator, and other allegations such as being a bigot and a zoophile. Now you might be thinking I'm hopping on this bandwagon calling Nickcheezy a pedophile or basically something along the lines of that, but I'm not going to be doing that today since I have a lot of information that debunks these allegations. Even though I am debunking these claims, I just want to get this out of the way real quick. I do not want to come across as invalidating these people who were personally affected by Nickcheezy. This is mainly a video going over some claims Nickcheezy has against him and also debunking them. Although these allegations are very serious and shouldn't be taken lightly, they are extremely questionable and are very vague. And also the people behind these allegations that they're making against Nickcheezy are also pretty questionable themselves. And when it comes to people accusing someone of being into children or anything serious similar to sexual misconduct, we shouldn't be throwing these terms around lightly. And just to remind you right now, these are serious accusations that can ruin somebody else's life. But anyways, please don't go after anyone I mention in this video, including Omega King and Nickcheezy. And this video will include very triggering subjects such as pedophilia, zoophilia, sexual harassment, mentions of NSFW subjects, racism, and mentions of incest. If you are sensitive to these said subjects, I suggest clicking off now. Your mental health matters more than just mainly a very triggering video that can deteriorate your mental health. With that being said, let's get started to this whole shit fest, shall we? Now, if you don't know who Nickcheezy is, he is a niche popular YouTuber who makes his own series, as in The Nickcheezy Show. You might recognize him when you're scrolling through your Instagram Reels and people posting his, infamous intro. Or even better yet, you might recognize it due to the fact that it's inspired off of the Patrick Show intro. He also makes other shows besides Nickcheezy's show and draws his own characters, which are basically just traced recolors of previous existing characters or outright from the source of where the character came from. Although some people may dislike his content due to the fact it looks like, a DeviantArt mess, if you want to call that. Most people find his content, mainly in the Nickcheezy show, really charming. Mainly because of the fact he can't really hate the show. This guy is just mainly doing it just for his own fun and entertainment, but besides that point. However, he got into some hot water for being an alleged child predator, zoophile, and recently a racist. For context, Nickcheezy used to be mutuals with Atira, aka Gobble97. Not only they were mutuals, but also Atira was involved with the whole Nickcheezy show. You might even recognize them from the fact that Nickcheezy would include one of their OCs, whether it be their own persona or their baby Sona, that is a fan-made child for Satan from Anton Blast, or whatever the fuck it's called. I don't really care. But then recently they have an issue of Nickcheezy making an episode of their baby Sona, that being their OC, bathing, and posting a community post that Arteria needed to read out for the script. However, Arteria had an issue with Nickcheezy making an episode with their OC, in that said scenario. Not only that, they were uncomfortable with Nickcheezy making references for their baby Sona and their persona. Mainly the back reference for the character, if that made any sense, but anywho. Then they would upload their own video responding to these said things over what Nickcheezy is doing to their characters and their own persona, saying how it made them uncomfortable and that the reference sheets in question is considered sexual just because they had a back reference for their Sona and their baby OC, especially with most of the comments sexualizing them or their baby Sona. Due to this, Nickcheezy ended up apologizing in their comments and making a community post discouraging people from sexualizing their persona and their baby Sona. But after that, things escalated with Omega King making 3 videos against the guy, which by the time I am scripting this video, he recently took down the 2 videos that he uploaded against Nickcheezy and only kept the third/final part up on his YouTube channel. Which in those videos, he called Nickcheezy a child predator for making those exact reference sheets and making that age is just a number joke.
You can't do that to the rabbit! Why not, Fish God? Because she's 5 years old! Oh, come on, Mr. Dog. Age is only a number. Oh, you know what else is a number? Well, what's that? 911!
Calling him a bigot for allegedly saying the N-word.
Just wanna say I'm not a bully. I don't care if niggas tell me I am stealing their content or they feel embarrassed with their old channel.
And not only that, calling him a zoophile for reposting questionable Pokemon shorts. Not only that, including an art piece where he made of his persona and a cat in an envelope with the cat having their bottom, like, exposed. And when those videos were up during the meantime, he will also get very aggressive with Nickcheezy and pressing him / pressuring him into going on call with him to basically have like some sort of trial. Which, due to these said events, Nickcheezy would end up taking a hiatus off the internet until September. Meanwhile, Arteria proceeds to make their own responses / testimonies, claiming the reference sheets to be sexual, then having a meltdown mid-video and ceasing contact from Nickcheezy.
You son of a bitch! Look what have you done to me? And my child? Why did you do that? You disgusting.
Remember this Bravey cartoon, right? Yeah, I voiced a fan child of me and Satan in this video with Nickcheezy. It was all right at first, until I see the comments. Dude, that's a literal baby! Especially the back of Bravey was very unnecessary despite the fact that she's a child. Which it kinda reminds me of how I was in a Nickcheezy show. Some of his fans are being weird and creep towards me on YouTube and especially on Twitter. Weird is that he is making a Bravey cartoon where Bravey was taking a bath and he also give me voice lines for it. No offense, Nickcheezy, but I'm kinda uncomfortable. I am not voicing this cartoon no more. Also, this might be upsetting to anyone, but I'm quitting the Nickcheezy show for now on.
Now that you know the basics, you might be asking me what is my take on this situation. Well, although some of the things he was accused of is pretty questionable, I would argue that most of the claims being made against him is utter bullshit. Let me start with the pedophilia claims. As if for the reference sheets, they're not really sexual. Like, I'm sorry, but Nickcheezy making a back reference for Arteria and their baby Sona isn't sexual. It also doesn't really help when this evidence in particular is extremely cropped. Because I feel like, in my own personal opinion, if you're cropping something that needs additional context to what claim you're making against the guy, I feel like you're trying to hide something from here in order to make them look bad. Which doesn't really help since majority of the evidence is either cropped, faked, that, or the evidence was doctored, which I'll get into in a little bit. When Arteria says that Nickcheezy sexualized her OCs and her persona, I assume that Nickcheezy would enhance sexual features like the breasts or the ass, that or posing them in a sexual manner. But if you look at the screenshots in question, it's really hard to argue that this is technically sexual. I mean, if anything, Nickcheezy traced her art in order to make these said references. Consider the fact that he mainly traces for his artwork, that or like stealing artwork. There wasn't really changes on the artwork other than being extremely similar to Arteria's art style. As for the bath episode, I don't really find this weird or sexual either. Because when Arteria was talking about how Nickcheezy sexualized her baby Sona by making a bath scenario, I would assume this is probably something similar to the whole Melanie Martinez situation of her being claimed to be a pedophile. Which what I'm referring to, by the way, is the whole cover for Crybaby, having obvious sexual innuendos in the said art piece, but that's a whole different can of worms. Anywho, when I saw these said screenshots and even the script itself, I mainly thought the scenario is comparable to Caillou taking a bath, for an example, or even any other baby show when a baby is bathing in a non-sexual way. And even then, Nickcheezy clarified that the episode being made was only for the intention to teach children how to do basic proper hygiene care. Though what I can say is that she is allowed to be uncomfortable with this, and I'm not saying she can't be. But it's another thing when you show your business out on the internet instead of contacting him privately or even in his comments at most. He even apologized for this, deleted the episode, and also discouraged people from sexualizing her characters. And speaking of that, it isn't his fault that his fan base is full of sexual degenerates. The only thing I would say is that he should at least make a video going over the said topic and discouraging people from sexualizing, children and their characters. But even then, it isn't his fault over something that obviously he can't really control. As in for the joke that he made, it is terrible, don't get me wrong. I think it's a little weird for Nickcheezy to be making this joke. But given the references from an SMG4 clip, this could be argued with the fact that he's making fun of pedophiles. He didn't even have the intention of wanting to sexualize children, or at least having the thought of wanting to fuck children. and trying to argue that these fantasies are normal. This is just a really bad joke that he made, that obviously he didn't intend to justify pedophilia. And this can be supported with the fact that, again, he made a community post discouraging people from sexualizing children, such as their characters, and her characters alone. Oh yeah, one more thing. I forgot to add this in the script, but also if we're going to talk about the fact that Nickcheezy is friends with Animator 320, who is a well-known pedophile, though I do find it weird how, like, Nickcheezy is trying to, like, defend them. I could also argue how, in my speculation / opinion, given the fact that he's a minor as of right now, and not only that, most people were saying that the website is clearly outdated, I can argue that he's being manipulated into supporting Animator 320. And most likely, since he has contact with him, Animator 320 is grooming him. However, I don't have proof of this is just my honest speculation / theory. I'm not gonna say it's not weird for Nickcheezy to be outright defending Animator 320 for his actions against, like, other victims. And you have every right to speculate that, like, you know, it's a little weird that he's supporting Animator 320, but I want you to keep in mind that he's probably getting groomed into supporting Animator 320. But again, that's just my speculation. You could take that as you will. As in for the bigotry claims, I could also argue that this is bullshit too, because the evidence they use for this is a channel that is obviously not Nickcheezy. I'm sorry, but if you watch their videos, obviously Nickcheezy's way of, like, speaking and also the grammar alone isn't really similar to this other Nickcheezy channel that they're trying to accuse him for bigotry. But also the art styles are a little bit different. I know you can't really tell given the fact that obviously the art style is from, like, an 11-year-old, which that was during the time that he said those, you know, racial slurs. Given the fact that he's currently 17, and even if it is him, it was from 6 years ago, which was during the time he was saying those racial slurs. It was back in 2019. If he did, the better argument would have been the fact he should at least make a response towards these said things that he have done and apologize for the racial slurs that he said when he was a kid. But really, I don't know why are we pulling old shit from years ago when they were a kid and didn't know any better, just to intentionally make a smear campaign rather than just be genuinely concerned about what he's doing on the internet, which obviously is, like, you know, very obvious from this situation, and I also think it's ironic, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. Though I would say, as I was digging through Twitter, I did find a screenshot of Nickcheezy calling someone a fur fag. Given the fact that this tweet was from a year ago, I am a little grossed out when he called someone a fur fag, and even if he can reclaim the said F slur, he's using it to insult someone. But also, again, part of me is kind of skeptical whether if this screenshot is legitimate. So take that with what you will. And lastly, the Zoophile claims. I am a little bit weirded out with Nick reposting suggestive feral art of a Pokemon character, but as in the art that he made, I am not sure whether he did have sexual intent to sexualize animals, and I really doubt that he did in this drawing. Basically similar with the claims with Atira or whatnot. That's all I can address for the claims against Nickcheezy at the moment. Mainly the other claims that have been spreading on YouTube as of late, whether it be like Nickcheezy replying to other people in his website saying that he is a pedophile, is obviously trolls trying to jump in the smear campaign in order to make him look worse. That, or even just doctoring evidence, or pretending to be Nickcheezy in order to say really awful stuff. However, if there's some evidence that I'm missing out on, which is actually legitimate, concrete proof of him being, you know, weird, please let me know, because this is all I have for right now. However, this isn't the end of this video, because I would like to go over to people who are making these claims against Nickcheezy, which, spoiler alert, they have their own set of issues that needs to be discussed right now.
Let's hope baby's got back, cause daddy likes a bit of junk in the trunk, brown sugar. Oh yeah, let's see oh great.
Since I was already weirded out by his behavior, and not only that, the sources that he gave about Nickcheezy being a child predator, and not only that, being very aggressive towards Nickcheezy, I decided to run a background check on him by watching his old videos, and most importantly, joining his Discord server. And lo and behold, there is a lot of questionable stuff I found against the guy. And that being very ironic over what they're accusing of Nickcheezy for. In their video against Atira, they admitted to saying the N-word multiple times and made art of someone's OC doing blackface. What's his defense for this? I'll just play the clip.
Oh, and the racial slurs. Yeah. So the racial slurs was unnecessarily on purpose. Like, I have no idea why was I saying the N-word so often. But I'm just going to say that I was like pretending to be like an Instagram user, something like that. I don't know. But I really shouldn't blackface my friend's character. Like, that was messed up, bro. Like, why did I do that? So there we go. It has been addressed.
It doesn't really help when one of my mutuals confronted him, his only response being that, oh, he quote-unquote changed. Not even at least an apology for saying he says racial slurs that he couldn't reclaim. But just overall mentioning his racism as some sort of brownie point or whatnot, but besides that. But it's also ironic given the fact that he was accusing Nickcheezy for the same shit, which at that point he's just basically shooting himself in the foot. While I was digging in his Discord server, I found that he was complimenting someone's fan art for him, which wouldn't be bad if the person they're praising isn't an actual child predator. If you don't know who Artie is, TLDR, he posted porn in front of minors and dated a 10-year-old when he was 16. Yeah. I'll link a video going over these allegations that he got against him, because he's a whole different topic that would make this video like 2 hours long, but anyways, I forgot to include this in the script, but I also confronted him via DMs whether he didn't know that he was praising a child predator or whatnot, but his only response to me telling him that he was a child predator was just a simple "oh," which obviously could mean that he really didn't know, but it doesn't really help given the fact that he's throwing false accusations of Nickcheezy being a child predator, and yet he's literally almost doing the same thing by praising a child predator's artwork for him. So take that for what you will. Now, as much as these allegations are serious and shouldn't be taken lightly, I would be cautious of what source you're getting these claims from. Especially as of right now, people are spreading false info of Nickcheezy admitting to being a child predator or him making an SFW of his own characters, which are either trolls or fake accounts or straight up edited in order to make him look bad. Now, besides the fact Omega King is really questionable given for what he has done, I also decided to take a little bit of a background check on Atira, aka the victim of Nickcheezy, and holy shit, they aren't as any better compared to Nickcheezy.
One of those new peer counselors. Well, I guess I'll have to talk to you then. See, I made that Shauna chick pregnant. What should I do?
Now, let's just rewind this whole situation. Before Nickcheezy, Omega King and Arteria got into some beef over shipping discourse. Basically, Arteria being very uncomfortable with people shipping themselves with different characters, but shipping herself with Satan from Anton Blast. Now, that wouldn't be a big deal other than the fact it's giving Sans' Mind 2014 type shit. If it wasn't for the fact that Omega King talked about how Arteria sexually harassed him, sending him porn of her favorite character and going as far as to making suggestive art of Omega's and her favorite characters in bunny suit outfits, and just overall being a weird degenerate when it comes to just shipping as a whole. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I don't think he could be talking so much how Nickcheezy is a child predator sexual degenerate, even though you had claims on you sexually harassing someone. And if you're gonna take your own issues and project it onto someone who has done literally nothing to you, I have a major bone to pick with you, because these allegations should not be thrown around so lightly. Especially when it can ruin someone else's life. It's one thing being uncomfortable with something that you don't like, but it's another thing to go full nuclear on a person so far as to call him a child predator for something that's so vague like this. But, anywho, she also has a fat fetish and is into mpreg. Now, you might be asking what is so relevant about these said things, and how does this have to do with anything with the fact that they're accusing Nickcheezy of being a pedophile? I'm not really taking issue with the fact that they're into fat fetishism and mpreg. Those are just harmless fetishes that obviously anyone can be grossed out with, but it's another thing when you're making full-on fetish art on your public YouTube page, but have an issue with Nickcheezy making reference sheets out of your own characters, insinuating them to be sexual just because he did the back view of the character. Which, by the way, didn't really have any sexual intent whatsoever. I'm gonna make a very hot take, and a really honest take, if I'm gonna be real with you. If Arteria is calling Nickcheezy a pedophile just because they were making reference sheets for their own characters, if anything, you're the weirdo for assuming a reference sheet of a baby is considered sexual just because of like a back view. I don't know why people didn't break this to you, but whatever. Because I'm sorry, apparently Arteria making fat fetish art on their YouTube community posts, which are public by the way, shouldn't be considered sexual whatsoever, but once it's Nickcheezy making reference sheets out of your own characters, all of a sudden you're throwing a bitch fit tantrum and saying that he's a child predator for making these said reference sheets. Even though Arteria is insinuating that a baby reference sheet of showing the back view of the said child is considered sexual. And it's not even them being unclothed or even just like enhancing sexual features in order to appear sexual. It's just a back view of a fucking reference sheet. I just find it really absurd how Arteria is assuming that these reference sheets are sexual in the slightest, even though obviously it doesn't have the intent to be sexual, especially when they're insinuating this on a reference sheet about a damn baby. Which, if you're making claims about Nickcheezy being a child predator for this, and yet you're insinuating it to be sexual over a reference sheet of a baby, you're basically shooting yourself in the foot for this claim. I forgot to add this in the script, but I find it extremely ironic how Arteria is making these claims about Nickcheezy, like very serious claims that can ruin someone else's life, and yet when they made a fat fetish art on their community post or whatnot, their inspo for the post was someone who ships themselves with a incest rapist. I know it's not always guilty by association, but again, you're making serious accusations of someone being a child predator, and yet you're shooting yourself in the foot by just taking inspiration off of someone who ships themselves with a incest rapist. It doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense. Because if you're going to be making serious claims like this, at least be consistent with what you're doing online.
Who did the young people pick as their leader? NBA young boy.
After Omega King and Arteria made their own testimony / responses, they ended up deleting / unlisting their videos about the whole situation and ended up making their own updates, basically admitting defeat. Not wanting to do with anything with Nickcheezy anymore and not making any more responses as of right now. As for Nickcheezy, he made a lengthy apology going over these said accusations that he was claimed against and overall apologizing for, if I'm gonna be honest, most of the shit that he really didn't do. As of right now, Omega King still makes community posts about the guy and posts faulty evidence / vague proof about the situation, still continuing to spread misinformation. Here's the thing, I'd be a little bit more understandable if he was taking evidence from someone who's obviously trying to make Nickcheezy look bad and that he didn't knew what the evidence contained. I would have been more understandable if he was misled and manipulated, but no, this wasn't the case. He was actively making a smear campaign on someone that he didn't like, especially with Atira. And I'm not really fond of people who would falsify evidence / take things out of context in order to make people look bad. Calling someone a pedophile just because you don't like them can ruin someone's life. It's not like an allegation that someone can make and it doesn't ruin their image, not really entirely, if that made any sense. And people don't realize when they make claims like this, it could basically just ruin their whole entire career. There's obviously a lot of examples that I can give out that happen in the same exact way, but I don't want to be comparing situations as it's really disrespectful. But what are my honest thoughts about the situation? I just find this whole situation really absurd. The fact that the situation could have been dealt with in private and have an appropriate adult conversation, but instead went full nuclear, I just think that's just really mortifying, if I'm gonna be really honest with you. It also doesn't make it look good given the fact that Nickcheezy is probably severely autistic and it's a random person having their own grudges and going full nuclear on someone who doesn't really understand what's going on. And I'm not going to sit here and say that, autism justifies the shit, even if it is true, but I'm just saying it doesn't make it look good if he's being aggressive, regardless if it's true or not. When it comes to allegations like this, you need to have an appropriate confrontation with someone. I get emotions, ends up being included in a situation, and people just end up getting a high sense of justice, or even just mad at people who done sick things like this. And I'm not gonna say I haven't done this either, because I do have my own emotions and I do get very abrasive and have my own high sense of justice sometimes when it comes to shit like this. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend to think that I'm better than everyone else. But holy shit, this situation was an absolute mess, and I'm very disappointed in Arteria and Omega King for this shit. This could have been handled a lot better, even if he didn't have any social media where you can contact him privately. This could have been done at least in the comment sections when it first started. It wasn't really that necessary, in order to just be very aggressive towards someone, that you're justifying it by saying they're an alleged child predator with little to no proof. But other than that, that's all I have to say about this whole situation. As much as these allegations are really serious and shouldn't be taken so lightly, you should also be very cautious of what source you're getting it from. Because you're not careful enough, you end up getting sources from people who are actively making smear campaigns on people rather than actually caring about the whole situation. And hell, even if I'm wrong about Nickcheezy not being a child predator, I am open in Discord DMs for sources. If I'm missing out on something, on actual evidence that people are not bringing up, let me know. Just because I am defending Nickcheezy doesn't mean I'm entirely biased on him. I'm more of stating the facts instead of just blindly following the said smear campaign. Cause when it comes to claims like this, it shouldn't be taken around like nilly-willy. But as of right now, Nickcheezy is not a child predator. And I'm pretty sure most importantly, he is not into animals. You can maybe still criticize him on being a bigot, but that's the only thing I take issue with. But as of right now, I do not want people to harass Nickcheezy, especially when he recently got doxxed too. That's how much hate he's basically getting. But that's all I have to say about this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Like I said, I am open to sources if I'm proven otherwise. But for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye-bye.